Will Tracy's Oscar-nominated screenplay for Begonia is a great case study for writers because it shows how you can respect traditional screenplay architecture without sacrificing your voice or watering down your message. In this deep dive, I'll give you my opinion about how he pulled it off. Begonia is so successful because it exists in layers, with the first layer being the spine or the plot, the beats of the film, the story. The second layer being the heart of the movie, which is the character map and thematic question that the film is asking. And then the third layer being the gravy, which is what Will Tracy brought to the project. It's what makes you, you. The cadence of your dialogue, the way you write your prose, how you structure your action. The easiest way to think about it is like an audition. You give two actors the same set of sides, and you're going to get two completely different performances. It's no different with writers. A good story should have a universal thematic question. That's a yes or no question that every character in the script is trying to answer. Those characters' answers are their worldview. And their strategies are the things that they do because of their worldview. Once you map all of that out, it's very easy to create conflict and drama and tension and arcs. If you want to know the easiest way to build an arc for a character, you have a thematic question and have that character's initial answer to the question be no, and then at the end of the film, the answer to that question is yes. That would be an arc. If the answer to that question is yes at the beginning of the film and it remains yes at the end of the film, then that character's arc is flat. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, in Begonia, I think every character in this film has a flat arc, except for Don. Don is the only character who changes his worldview, who changes his answer to the thematic question, and it's a tragic arc. But we'll get into that. So what's the thematic question for Begonia? For me, it's, can we remove ourselves from the pain that we inflict on others? There could be other questions out there. If you give this script to 20 writers, you're going to get 20 different opinions about what the theme or the thematic question is. It doesn't really matter so long as all of the characters can respond to that question and have an answer to that question. As a writer, though, you should know what your thematic question is so that you can structure your script based on the answers to that question. So for Begonia, the thematic question for me is, can we remove ourselves from the pain that we inflict on others? Let's see how this maps out. We'll start with Teddy. Teddy's answer to the question is yes. Of course we can remove ourselves from the pain that we inflict on others. We have to. And his strategy for that is to build a reality where inflicting pain on others is justified. It's justified because it's blame shifting. Everybody in this movie is engaging in some form of blame shifting. Teddy can't appreciate the fact that all of these terrible things happen to him. He's got this trauma involved with Casey. He's got the trauma with his mother. He's got the mental illness, generational trauma. There's socioeconomic issues at play here. But Teddy can't he can't accept any of that, and so he's constructed his own reality that explains his pain. And so that's why his strategy is to create this reality, reject any other sense of reality, and then force that reality on to others. What about Michelle? Michelle's answer is the same. Yes, you can remove yourself from the pain you inflict on others, but her strategy, her reasoning is slightly different. To her, the pain that she directly causes other people is excusable in the name of science or in the name of profit, in the name of corporation. She runs a pharmaceutical company, and so of course, what's the expression? You can't make an omelet without cracking a few eggs. That's Michelle, and her strategies are power and dominance and confidence, and so no matter what happens, she sees people like Teddy and blames them for their own problems. Teddy sees people like Michelle and blames her for all of his problems. In fact, he sees the universe as being responsible for his trauma and pain. Now let's look at Don. Don's answer to the question is a reluctant yes. Because it has to be yes, because he's so loyal to Teddy. because Teddy means so much to him, because he loves him so much. And so he's going to go along with this worldview. He's going to go along with this conspiracy, not because he truly believes it, but because it's just so important to him to be close to Teddy. And so his strategies are to kind of question everything and to apologize and to not really be so sure and so committed. He'll still do what he's told, but it's he has issues with it, and that's why he's the only character that evolves over the course of the film. Finally, let's look at Casey. Casey doesn't appear in the first act physically, but his shadow looms very large because of the trauma that he's inflicted on Teddy in the past. So Casey's answer is also yes. He's not responsible for the pain that he caused Teddy and Lord knows how many other children that he babysat. But his strategy for that is to excuse himself, to make excuses, to justify it, to downplay it, to kind of show guilt and remorse, even though he's not, because he doesn't take responsibility. He's blame shifting too, right? He's blaming immaturity for what he did. Oh, it was some sort of a power thing. So Casey is also refusing to accept responsibility for his own actions, which is a through line for this entire film. So now that we have our character map in place, let's start looking at the screenplay for Begonia. It's the shooting script. We're not looking at the film, but I will, when I see differences in the screenplay and the film, I will do my best to tell you where they diverge. So let's jump in. So what you're seeing on the screen now is the shooting script for Begonia with all my notes on it. So, Begonia, written by Will Tracy. This is an adapted screenplay. It was nominated for an Academy Award for adapted screenplay. And we're going to start over black with Teddy saying in voiceover, "It all starts with something magnificent." What a great first line, because this line is the entire movie. It all starts with something magnificent implies that it's going to end with something horrifying, and that's exactly what happens. So Will Tracy is able to give us the entire film in one line before we even cut from black. Very impressive. Then we get our true opening image, which is an apple blossom flower with a honeybee landing on it. And that's also going to be our closing image. So we have opening image, closing image, just like you're taught to do in your beat sheets and in Save the Cat. And it bookends the film nicely. So here we're in our status quo section, and really we're doing two status quos at one time. We're going to do Teddy and Don's status quo, and we're going to do Michelle's status quo, and we're going to intercut between them. But the way that Tracy writes the status quo section for Teddy and Don is pretty slick, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a minute. But I want to focus on another line that Teddy says here about honeybees. He says, "It's like sex, but cleaner. Nobody gets hurt." That line is Teddy's entire backstory of trauma, and it explains his worldview and why he's creating this reality. Teddy's talking to Don, and he says, "Don, they're dying." This is a projection that sets up the first mission of Act 2. Teddy's externalizing the problem. He's creating a problem that he's going to now tell Don how to fix. And one of the things I like about what Will Tracy does here is he does a very quick setup and payoff. He introduces a young man and then immediately identifies him as Teddy's cousin, Don. He could have easily said Teddy's cousin, Don, in apiarist garb, watches. But this quick setup and payoff is just, it's Will Tracy. This is the gravy that I'm talking about. This is Will Tracy's voice coming out. Now, if this was being read in competition, I don't know if you'd get dinged for that. But take a look real quick at how Will Tracy uses white space on the page. It's very easy to read, it's very easy to scan, and it's like this all the way through the script. One interesting thing about his formatting, though, is how he does his temporal part of his slug lines. He doesn't use a dash, he uses a period. Sometimes he uses a dash, as you can see down here. But it's mostly he uses a generalized setting, and then a specific setting like here, Teddy's house, laundry room. That would have the dash and then period day. That's not standard formatting, and you probably would get marked off for that in a competition or with the reader for not following established formatting rules. Stupid, right? But is what it is. So here on page 2, Teddy starts with all of his conspiracy talk, nonsense, psychobabble bullshit. This is the same kind of nonsense talk that Michelle is going to use in the corporate setting. Only Teddy's using it to explain colony waste, right? Like CCD. But what he's also saying is that that's not complicated enough. In Teddy's mind, in the reality that he's building, it can't be low level conspiracy shit. It's got to be something much bigger, which is why he says, as if a feckless dying plutocracy could organize a fucking GoFundMe, let alone a global pricing conspiracy. He's looking for something bigger. He's looking for a way to blame shift on a universal level, not just on a small level. And then we get another nice thing that Will Tracy does, which is taking something that's seemingly domestic or that you're not paying attention to, and then you follow that item or that track through to something that gives it different meaning. So here, where they're pulling clean towels from the dryer, it just seems like a chore, like something that they would do in their normal life every day. But what we find out a couple scenes later is that they're putting it on the ground to do sit-ups and to train. So they're taking this item, this non-threatening item, and they're going to use it to prepare for something violent. It's the same way that he uses the bees, this piece of nature, as a way to enter into this conspiracy sphere that he will validate and justify all of his actions through. And on page 3, Teddy says that he's found it in the stars. He's found the cause of all their pain. And then we cut to Michelle. And Michelle opens her eyes right before her alarm clock goes off. It's a small detail, but it shows how in control Michelle is over everything. Not even sleep can surprise her. And so now we're introduced to Michelle's ordinary world and her routine, but we're doing it by cutting back and forth between her and Teddy. He says, "We're not steering the ship, they are. And now it's up to you and me to stop them." So Michelle hasn't even said a word. We don't know anything about her. But Teddy has already set her up in the audience's mind to be the bad guy, because he's describing her as she's doing all of these things that rich people do. And using status as a character trait to make an assumption about a character is not new to Will Tracy. He did it in Secession. He did it in The Menu. He did it in his time with The Onion. He's really, really good at using status as a flaw, whether that's deserved or not. But I think the combination of how rich and how powerful and how in control Michelle is, plus all of these things that Teddy is saying, makes you dislike her before she even says a word. And so here's where I want to talk a little bit about how this is an odd status quo section, or an ordinary world section, because Teddy and Don's true ordinary world would be just going through their day. Teddy going to his job, Don doing whatever he does, during the day when Teddy's at work. But that's not what we're getting here. What we're getting here is planning. He's gathering supplies, he's training, he's planning. He's already in motion leading towards the inciting incident, which is the kidnapping. So when we're getting the ordinary world for them, it's really Teddy explaining what life is like for them and why they're doing what they're doing in a present and in a past tense. And we're getting all of this information in real time because it's being conveyed through Don. One thing about Don is clearly the entry into Teddy's world for the audience. He is us. He's that character, like the rookie FBI agent who goes into, Will Smith in Men in Black. He has to get everything explained to him. Or the agent in Hellboy. He's got to get everything explained to him. Or even Clarice in Silence of the Lambs. She comes in and she's got to be told everything about Dr. Lecter. That's how we experience the world. That's how we get introduced into the world of the film. Don is that character. And he walks the line of being a pure exposition machine, but Will Tracy's so efficient with how he tells his story and gets right into his story that it didn't bother me, but it might bother some people because he's clearly the exposition machine in the first part of this movie, or actually throughout the entire movie. but it is still part of his strategy because he's always questioning things he's never quite sure. So Tracy's been able to work that strategy and worldview into Don's character in a way where the exposition is, it's still exposition, but it's a little bit more organic than you might get from a lesser writer. And then further down here, as we cut back and forth between the training and their lives and Michelle's life, Tracy's also showing you how, as rich and powerful as Michelle is, she's alone, and there's something, there's a negative connotation to being alone, as opposed to Teddy having Don and seemingly caring for and loving Don. That's a sense of community. So you're already separating, and it's another status, another commentary on status and power, where you want to side with Teddy and Don, even though you know already that Teddy's crazy. But he might be crazy, but Michelle is still this CEO, corporate, awful, rich person. All right, so as you can see on page 5 here, I say theme on page 5, which is the sweet spot on your beat sheet for where you want to establish your theme. And I think it comes from Teddy saying they want you to think it's you, that it's you who made this world, but it's always been them, cuz. Blame shifting. This is setting up the thematic question of, can we remove ourselves from the pain that we inflict on others? Because that's what he's coaching Don to do right now, in a way that Teddy's going to reframe as heroic. And he does this through manipulation, constant manipulation. He's constantly manipulating Don by complimenting him and telling him not to apologize. I mean, Don is essentially his one function is to apologize. He's always apologizing because he can't buy into this reality, right? And so Teddy's constantly saying, like, you see how they've stripped you of your confidence. It's them. It's not you. It's them. It's blame shifting. So there's a lot of exposition front loaded here. The socioeconomic divide between them, the luxury car, the broken down, town that they live in. And then he says, we're the same as the bees. A dead colony, broken, atomized in a trillion directions. Will Tracy isn't trying to be subtle here. He's not trying to bury the metaphor because he doesn't need to. Obviously the bees are a metaphor. But that's something that Teddy knows too. And so we need to know that he's built his entire logic system around this idea of we are the bees, we are dying, they are killing us. And then we have some great visual storytelling here, because you're in a strip mall, and on one side you have the pharmacy, and on the other side you have the toy store. You have something childish, and you have something very adult. And that's carried over from the toy store to the hardware store, where they're going to buy all the supplies that they need for the kidnapping. So we're going from costumes and kiddie play to the seriousness of what they're actually doing. And on page 7, Teddy exposes his entire real reason for what he's doing. And he says, no one on earth gives a single fuck about us. And that is such a brutal statement, but it is so true. We'll find out later about Casey. We'll find out later about his mother. We'll find out later about his father abandoning them. Teddy is a guy who, if he had been born and raised under different circumstances, might have grown up to be a CEO, because he's smart and he's intuitive and he's eloquent and he can manipulate. He's got all of the same characteristics that make Michelle great at her job. He was just born in the wrong place at the wrong time. And so over the years, it's turned into no one on earth gives a single fuck about us. And he's saying this to Don because he's pulling Don into his world. I don't think Don would agree, because Don gives a fuck about Teddy. That's the whole reason why he's doing this. But that's not enough for Teddy, because Teddy doesn't want to be proven wrong. And then we get a little bit more planning, no screens, get your body ready, no whacking it, and more manipulation. I know you're legit, Don. You're smart and brave, and no one else sees it but me. He is locking Don into himself, into him, right? Inextricably intertwined. And then Teddy finishes locking in that thematic question. You're my best friend in the world, my only friend. I'm doing this to save you most of all, bud, and I won't let anyone hurt you. Okay, he's just justified all the brutality that he's about to embark on, and obviously we learn later that this is not the first time, and so he's been using this rationale for we don't know how long to justify the awful, horrible things that he's done. And then on page 9 is what I call the seed, which is sort of the halfway point between the opening image and the inciting incident, where the disruption that is the inciting incident is kind of planted, and it's a moment, it's an escalation for the characters that feels different than an ordinary world. And this one's huge. This one is huge. So on page 9 is the chemical castration, and he's doing it to Dawn, seemingly giving Dawn a choice, but it's a fake choice. But Dawn still wants to save Teddy, and he gives him a way out. He says, I thought maybe I'd like to be with someone one day. You can't appeal to someone's emotion any better than that. He's telling Teddy, you're robbing me of my future. And if Teddy really loved Dawn, this is where he would stop. But he doesn't. And the major reveal on page 10, like I have. Holy shit. Teddy's already done it to himself. He's chemically castrated himself. He's locked himself into this mission already. He's done this before we even met him, before the movie even started, before the script even started. So now we know that he's not full of shit. He's ready. He's prepared himself. He's doing it. And the way he's doing it is by talking about pain traps. So Teddy already believes that any form of human intimacy is a weakness, a pain trap, because he's closed himself off to the idea of intimacy because of his trauma, because of his childhood, because of everything that's happened to him. And so he's shutting himself down emotionally, and then the physical manifestation of that is the chemical castration. But he's saying it to Dawn as if he's giving Dawn a choice, as if this equals freedom. And when he asks him if he's ready to feel what it's like to be free, Dawn doesn't say, hell yeah, let's do it. He says, I guess it feels like when we were little, when everyone was still here before things got bad. Dawn just wants things to be okay again. And Teddy's using that against him because he knows he needs somebody with him. He's too much of a coward to do this by himself. And then on page 11, we establish what the first mission of Act 2 is going to be. All we've lost all these years, all the shit that's been done to us. We're setting that shit right again, and no one can stop us. We're going to fix humanity. And then the title, Begonia. Why do we have the title here? Why this placement? Why not at the beginning? Why are we cutting to Begonia? And by now, I'm sure everybody's Googled Begonia to know what it is. And it means an ancient Mediterranean folk practice and myth based on the belief that bees can spontaneously generate from the decaying carcass of a dead cow or ox. My reading on why the title is here, I think this is Will Tracy telling us that we are already the decaying carcass of the ox. We've already been sacrificed. And so it's only a matter of time before we spontaneously generate bees, which, of course, at the end of the movie, we end on a bee. So the bleakness, the satire, the dark comedy here is that the ending's already been written. We are already the rotting, decaying carcass of the ox, humanity. And so now we're properly introduced to Michelle. She finally gets to talk. And what does she do when she talks? She's talking about this diversity training that she's going to have to do that she doesn't believe in, and she literally can't get the words out because she doesn't believe any of it. And this is also a subtle plant that before we met Michelle, she must have done something in order for this diversity training to be mandatory, for her to be putting this video together. She already did something terrible. We don't know what it is, and we don't need to know what it is. It's just a really good way to introduce her as this just badass, just enemy, just monster. And of course, everything she's saying is bullshit, and she's just using words as bullets, making fun of the language, saying, can we please diversify the language? Maybe crack open a thesaurus. And then she just makes fun of the entire human condition, saying that your lack of synonyms is triggering me, Chris. So she's mocking society, and she's really saying that anybody below her is an idiot. They're stupid. And so this is partly her strategy of enforcing her worldview that, yeah, any pain I cause, it's not my fault. It's your fault for being stupid. It's your fault for not being powerful enough or smart enough to not get hurt. And we get this 2 or 3 pages of Michelle just being horrible and giving false choices to people. Leave if you want to, but maybe you shouldn't. Everyone can leave at 5:30, but if you got quotas, you got to remember we're running a business here. So she's always talking out of both sides of her mouth. But what she's saying is it's not she's not trying to mask anything. Everybody's gonna obey her. Everybody's gonna do what she says. And think about this. Think about what Will Tracy's doing here. Think about how easy it would have been for him to make Michelle nice. If we like Michelle, then the kidnapping is going to impact us differently. If we like Michelle, maybe it plays against audience expectation of status. Because we already kind of don't like Teddy. We like Dawn, but we know Teddy's a lunatic. So we also don't like Michelle. If we liked Michelle and we could just put them on opposite sides, then you'd have somebody to root for. But he made Michelle horrible, which forces us to think, do we really care if she gets kidnapped? Do we really care if she gets hurt? It's forcing us to confront our answer to the worldview. Can we remove ourselves from the pain being inflicted on others? And when the audience has to ask of themselves the same question that the characters in the film have to ask, you've got a tight script. You've got something that's working. And here we are on page 14, and we enter the inciting incident section of the film. The kidnapping. The absurdity of the Halloween masks and the kidnapping and how clumsy it is versus Michelle's Krav Maga training. A payoff already we have set up from her training to payoff of her using her moves and nearly escaping this kidnapping, and how bungling and bad at this Teddy and Dawn are. This is a really great sort of action sequence where everything is motivated by their characters. And that's what a good action sequence should do. It shouldn't just get your heart rate up. It should push the character traits and the worldviews and the conflicting ideologies of the characters. And that's what's happening here. In fact, Michelle's isolation, right? The fact that she lives in luxury and she is in a gated house and shut off from the outside world, that's the thing that betrays her. There's no one to help her. There's no one to hear her scream. And so she's got to defend herself. And again, look at the white space on the page. 2 lines, 3 lines, 2 lines, 3 lines. If this was in competition, Will Tracy would not lose a single point on formatting. This is an easy script to read, and he's hit his beats to the page. Inciting incident on page 14 and 15. And then by page 16, we're in what I call the chaos section of the first act, which is everything that happens between the inciting incident and the Act 1 turn. It's all about getting the characters to the point where they can't turn back. Because even now, at the inciting incident, they can still abandon the mission. Dawn can still convince Teddy that what he's doing is wrong, and they can stop the car and they can run away. And Michelle can wake up and she hasn't been kidnapped. And so they're not locked into the mission yet. Not yet. The chaos sequence is what gets them from we can turn back if we want to we have now crossed into Act 2 and there is no turning back. We have to move forward with the first mission. So in the car, Teddy is directing Dawn to shave her head so that they can't get tracked by the aliens, and it seems crazy, but it doesn't seem random. Teddy has built this narrative, and he's explained this narrative to us through Dawn, where shaving her head might seem crazy, but it fits the logic of the world that he's created, the reality that he's created. The problem is that Dawn still sees a human. He still sees a scalp, right? He still sees a scalp that can get cut. He still sees a person that can get hurt because he doesn't want to believe in Teddy's reality. And another thing is happening here. There's cloud coverage. And so Teddy's taking things in real time, and he's saying, "Oh, fucking cloud coverage, can't see shit." And Don asks, "Well, what about our eyebrows?" He says, "Oh, those are ornamental." "Oh, of course, because no detail is too small or too big not to reinforce the reality that Teddy's created." And then Corey calls, and Teddy has to work that into the reality of his worldview. And so he says, it's them tracking us. So now Corey's part of them too, because everybody's part of them. Because nothing is going to trip up Teddy into thinking that what he's doing is not justified. Then we get this little car chase with a cop, and they're able to get away from the police officer. This isn't in the film. This was taken out of the film. This change, and there's a small change earlier on when they're exercising. Instead of doing sit-ups in the movie, they're doing high knees, and Don thinks that they look kind of funny. I prefer the film version. I just think it's funny but not silly. And I also approve of this scene being taken out because this is kind of classic. Like, they almost got caught writing, and the story didn't need that. What the story needed was just to jump right into the meat of the movie. And then they're at a campfire. They're burning the hair and getting rid of the phone. It's an escalation, right? It's a domino effect from the kidnapping. All of these things, none of them are random. None of them are just placed in there as moments for character for us to feel a certain way. Everything is in there as an escalation leading us towards the lock, or the Act 1 turn, which is about to come up. And Teddy, being the manipulative guy that he is, says, "You were amazing, cuz." And Don says, "I was? Oh yeah, Alpha King shit. I knew you could do it, and sure enough, you fucking crushed it." And so Don says, "I got you, Teddy, always." I think what Will Tracy's doing with Teddy is pretty elegant, because Teddy is the human condition. He's manipulative, but he also loves Don. Both those things can be true. And that's the same about all humans, about humanity. You can be horrible in one sense, but still be somebody's father, or still be somebody's son, or still give to charity. And it's really hard for an audience to pick which thing they want to lock onto, because we are more than one thing. We can be good and we can be bad at the same time. So that's why I say I don't even know if Teddy realizes that he's being manipulative to Don, because he also loves him. So on page 20 is the beginning of our lock sequence, our Act 1 turn sequence, and we are introduced to Teddy's basement, and we have a Chekhov's gun moment here with this thing under the table, this mystery. And what Will Tracy is doing is he's setting up an Act 2 mystery. He's planting all of these things that we know have to get resolved, right? And so what is that thing under the table? And now we get the payoff on all the things that they bought at the hardware store. This is all the stuff that they used to keep Michelle locked up. And so Don, of course, being us, is like, "Well, how do you know? Like, how can you tell? How do you know that she's an alien?" And Teddy has a response, "Well, if you cook enough steaks, you know if it's medium rare without even touching it." It's this fucking bullshit explanation. The audience is supposed to think that Teddy's a nut job, so that the reveal lands harder. But the reveal ultimately doesn't matter. The fact that Michelle's an alien really doesn't change anything about what this script is trying to say. It just adds to the satire, to the dramatic irony, which we will cover when we get to that twist. And then during this Act 1 turn sequence, Teddy and Don get into suits. They're putting on performative armor, because this whole thing is like performance art, and they don't know what they're doing. And we get a little tidbit about Teddy's dad, that this is why he left him the suit. But what really happened is his dad abandoned him, right? I mean, so he's been abandoned by his dad. We're going to find out that his mom had mental issues and put all this conspiracy shit in his head. And then, she had her drug issues and all of the pain that she went through because of the clinical trial that she was part of. And you've got Casey, who's going to be introduced, and we're going to learn about all the horrible things. Well, thankfully we don't learn about all the horrible things, but they're hinted at about what he dealt with. And so he's flipping these things. He's turning these things into part of his worldview. His dad didn't abandon him. His dad left the suit for a reason. And he's also using it as a way of saying, like, "Fuck you, status." What does he say here? He says, "What's that swine gonna do? Call the fashion police and arrest you?" Right? It's not in control anymore. We are. We decide what's elite. We decide what looks baller. And guess what? You look baller. That's some incel shit right there. But it's also part of just continuously building Don up and continuously creating a reality that's just going to reinforce what he's planning to do. But he's smart, so he knows that if Don starts talking, he's gonna fuck things up. So he's like, "Yeah, you're baller, you're doing great, but you know what? Maybe you shouldn't talk. Don't talk. Let me do all the talking." And he gets out in front of his own psychology by saying, "Just stare it down. Beast mode. No quarter. Don't let it filibuster. Don't give it space to speak its truth or its trauma or whatever the fuck. Just stand strong, okay?" That's he what he's doing is distancing himself from his own trauma, and he's projecting it onto Michelle, and he's saying, "Don't let any of that pain trap bullshit steer you in the wrong direction." He might as well be talking to the mirror and saying, "Teddy, don't let your trauma distract you. You've got a mission to you got work to do." And then this really odd statement where he says, "We'll win with our ideas." I don't know what that means, and I don't think that you're supposed to know what that means, because it's just crazy talk, right? We're gonna win with our ideas. It sounds good. It sounds like a good thing to say, that we're gonna beat them with our mind, but it doesn't mean anything. And so here at the end of the Act 1 turn, as we enter into Act 2, Michelle comes to and her eyes open again, and it's a good mirror from when we were first introduced to her. The last time she opened her eyes, it was right before her alarm clock. This time, she opens her eyes and she's in the basement. Look at where we are. Screenplay architecture, inciting incident on page 15, Act 1 turn sequence from page 23 to 28. This is efficient storytelling. But on top of the architecture, on top of the beat placement, we have such a compelling character map and such great gravy that it elevates this seemingly plot driven movie into something much more cerebral and much more interesting. So I hope that you found this informative. Leave in the comments if you disagree with me or if you think I got something right or wrong. And I hope that you join me for part 2 of this deep dive, which will be Act 2 of Begonia. And until next page, I'm Matt Weiner, and this is Fade In, a channel dedicated to the art of screenwriting.